Good evening. It's on or about 7 p.m. Monday evening, April 24th, 2023. This is Athens City Council in committee night. We have three committees meeting tonight. Our Finance and Personnel, the City and Safety Service Committee, and Transportation Committee. I should mention that I'm filling in as President Pro Tem for Chris Nicely, who is President of Council but absent tonight. Our first committee that is meeting tonight is our Finance and Personnel Committee to discuss a couple of issues of bond issue and telemetry. So if members Crow, Reisner, Ziff, and Spionis will stay at the dais, and Grace and Swank retire to the desk.
Ooh, retire.
I'll turn it over to Member Crow.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Reisner. Yes, two items on our agenda tonight. The first is the bond issue. At our last meeting, we passed the amendment to the appropriation for the fire department headquarters. And tonight we have on our agenda the discussion of how to pay for that. And we're very lucky to have the auditor with us tonight, and I might just ask her to give us her recommendations on the bond issue. Thank you, Auditor.
Okay. As you said, we need some more money to build our fire station. We passed a levy, and that's what that money is for. It's for all safety services, but the fire department was our main purpose in passing that. The bond issue involves, we have a bond consultant firm. It's a wealth management firm, employee-owned, R.W. Baird, and they are the ones, our person there, Mike Burns, is the one who puts together all the paper. He's already put stuff together like the amortization schedule. He's the one who helps us make sure we have our bond rating with Moody's, and puts together all the info. They are the ones who will put it out for bid, for bond, and all that. Then we also have our bond counsel, who is a legal firm, and Dennis Schwally has been our representative there for well before I started 20 years ago. And so they put together the government legal side, which is the ordinance that you guys pass, and there's also a resolution that goes with it. So when you see that, some of you have seen it already, but it doesn't look like our other ordinances because it has a lot of legal stuff in there that is required. And so all of the paperwork for this stuff is done, and they are both waiting for me to tell them tomorrow that we're going to move forward with this. Basically, it's either do this or wipe funds out of other funds that we have. And I believe we've also, in my office, done calculations about how much our revenue will be. We know how much revenue we bring in from the different levies for the different funds. And I believe that we can cover this. And if it's necessary, I think this is the way to go for this. So we're looking at a 19-year issue, this, and it will be a little different than the $9 million issue that we went out for. We did that recently. We won't have to, Mayor and I won't have to deal with Moody's and all that kind of stuff, and it'll go quicker, and we'll have to do quite so much. It'll be a direct issue, and that's where we can get the best interest rate. Any other ideas about the process? If okay, moving forward with that, then the ordinances will start on Monday.
Is that rate established yet, that interest rate?
No, but it's probably very close, if not at the actual rate. Oh, I left that. I think it's 3.78 is what he's estimating for 19 years.
Okay.
So if you look at our debt schedule, you know, that's about what the rates are. more than that for our investments, so it's probably the way to go.
Okay, thank you. I can, Mayor, would you like to?
I just wanted to add to what the auditor was saying, is that what, when she was mentioning not having to go before Moody's, we wouldn't have to go and reestablish our bond, our rating again, our bond rating, which is wonderful. It's a lot of work. We've done it twice, but given this process, that won't be necessary.
It's a lot of work, and it's something we need to do, but because our last rating was so recent, this will help us move along, which we need to do. You all know our time frame and what's happened to it, the other things that we need to do. And then what we'd like to do is pass this ordinance under suspension on second reading. And that has to do with the bids, and Andy can talk about that, but when they accept the bid and start moving forward on the building, we can't drag that out anymore. We've already added on to our cost. It'll just add more cost to us the more we drag that out. Council could also do a special session if they wanted to do 3 readings. I really think we need to do this by the end of the month.
Mayor?
Tag team with you, so I apologize for that. What council passed, and you remember, it was, there was layers to what was being passed. And as the auditor is indicating, by passing this, at 4 million and not to exceed 6%, and I agree with the auditor that it's likely going to be less than that, but we don't know. But having that as language within this, it certainly allows us to not have to, or at least to be able to put monies back where we have taken them from, depending on how if we go back and amend the ordinance that council passed, which is likely the case, to where it becomes the bond as opposed to having to pull from current funds that exist right now, that council so graciously passed last week.
Thank you, Mayor. From the committee, yes, Member Spielness.
Yeah, so I think it might be a good reminder to the public how dire it is that we get this thing built, because I recall a year ago when I went to visit the fire station, it is in really bad shape, the current one that we need to replace. And I think it's important to realize that we have a limited amount of time before that thing is going to just fall apart, and that would be a disaster. So anyway, do we have any updates on the conditions of the fire station?
It's pretty much in the condition, not that it was a year ago, because we did, put money into that building to continue to secure it, but, it's a building with a life expectancy, and to remind everyone, the main issue with the fire station headquarters is the weight of the equipment that sits inside that facility. I've not heard that any more spalling is taking place or any other chunks of concrete are falling. I can get more intel on that, but again, it's a building that we're on the path to building a new 50-year building. Hopefully it's longer than that, but we'll see. And it's going to be a building that council is well aware that is going to be situated at an extremely high visibility standpoint with the new 33, 32, 50 interchange that's going in. It's going to be a highly recognizable facility, and so there for us to have it fit with the look and feel of the city of Athens, I think is very important. But Councilmember Spielness, your point's well taken, is that, again, we've got to, in time, migrate our firefighters out of the old facility and get them into a new facility that we don't have to worry about the same issues.
Other members of the committee? Other members of council? Member Swank?
I want to make sure that I have my numbers right here. And we're talking about a fire station. I'm going to talk about a $4 million house. So I think we can all identify with that a little easier, although I don't think any of us live in a $4 million home. but I want to buy a $4 million house. I have two options. I'm lucky enough, like the city, to have invested money well, and I have $4 million sitting in my personal account. I can write that check and move into the house tomorrow. But by writing that check for that $4 million that I have in an investment instrument, I no longer am going to collect interest on that. Or I can go to the bank and borrow $4 million at an interest rate. Now, I think you said this, but I'm not sure. Assuming that we can get in this neighborhood of 3.784, whatever, percentage rate. Did I hear you correctly that our current investment portfolio is making more than that?
I can't answer that, honestly. I know that Star Ohio is paying 5.25%. I don't know where all of we have different types of investments. You'd have to ask the treasurer how that's coming in. But he does know about this and he agrees with it. That this would be the way to go. Instead of depleting, we would just have to go back and look at our cash balance, our cash reserve policy for the general fund, and the fact that a lot of those funds that we want to scoop up or could scoop up to help pay for this instead of borrowing, we already had other plans for it. This isn't the only thing going on in the city.
Well, if I recall, at the beginning of the year, we had $30 million of unappropriated funds. So do we have plans for this, or do we think we might have plans for this?
30 million where?
That was the big discussion about the budget. So little of it was appropriated.
Well, that would be the total budget.
Yes.
So if we're looking, there are only certain funds
That we
with
can take from.
unappropriated money that we can use this for.
Right.
So it wouldn't be 30 million. So we have, I do have my unappropriated balance. So the general fund for one, this is new and I think it has this out of it, but it's like 2 million right now unappropriated.
Is that on top? So it's unappropriated. That $4 million that we passed last week. It was 6 million. That's still off to its side,
We
right?
didn't take that whole 4 million out of the general fund.
Right.
So it was 2.8 or 6 or something like that, 2.6 out of there. So yeah, that would be on top of that 2.1.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at here is simple high school personal finance class would tell you that if you are going to save money by borrowing, that's the route to go. In other words, if your investment income is greater than your loan liability, then it makes sense to borrow. But if the loan liability, that percentage rate, is greater than your investment income rate, makes sense to go the other way.
We can't promise that over 19 years. I mean, how do we know where the investments are going to go? Our treasurer does an excellent job keeping track of that, moving money around when necessary. But I can't promise you that it's going to be that. But it would be the same for me buying a house. I'm never going to buy a $4 million house. But say I buy a $250,000 or $300,000 house. I might have that much available, but do I want to tie up all the money that I have sitting there and just buy the house outright? Or do I want to take out a loan like most people do, get a mortgage, and so that I have money available for other things, in particular emergencies? But yeah, I think most people make that other choice all the time, of not just wiping out all their savings and investments when they buy a house.
So I guess the question here, would it be possible, since it seems like I'm hearing that people want to put this on the fast track, that I heard you loud and clear, we're not guaranteed it's going to be 3.78, but at 3.78 on $4 million, how much in interest are we going to pay over the 19 years? And secondly, how much are we, what do we have available right now that we could use of our own money? I think for us to make that kind of, I think for us to vote on something of this magnitude without those figures, would not be having the whole story. And that's what I would like to have before I vote one way or the other on this.
So the thing is, you have to keep in mind that our investments include like all of the funds. So just because we have a couple $1 million CDs doesn't mean we can just cash those in for the fire station, because there's all this other unappropriated money that belongs to other funds that are separate, in particular like water, sewer, and garbage, which are proprietary, also the parking garage. Water and sewer are big funds. And so any money, whatever they have unappropriated, has to still be available. We can't just wipe out CDs that dip into the unappropriated balance in other funds.
Well, understood. I guess what I'm asking is, and I know you don't have the answer today, it'd be unfair for me to ask for that answer today, but what funds are available? How much? As of whatever today is.
It depends on how you look at whether they're available. In my mind, you know, we took this 2.6 out of the general fund. In my mind, there are other things that we, you know, had planned for that. Is that really available? Yes. The extra money that you appropriated last week is available. But those are probably the only funds. And you can remind me, so one, what are the other funds? ARPA. The ARPA funds, you know, plans for that. That money's not coming back.
Right.
Neither is all that money in the general fund, because that was partly CARES Act funds. And because of the size of that fund, our carryover should be at least $1 million every year at the minimum. So, yeah, we don't wipe out unappropriated balances, because we have to have money to start the new year with, et cetera, et cetera. And so, well, there was
Mayor, would you like to comment?
I would, Auditor, if I can kind of jump in a little bit, because, you know, the 30 million that I am listening to in terms of what was budgeted, you know, a lot of that is money that's coming in throughout the year. It's not money that all of a sudden there's 30 million sitting in there. It's money that's going to, as you were just indicating, it's going to be water rates, it's going to be sewer rates, it's trash rates, it's parking meter revenue, and other things that are coming into that. Certainly we budget, you know, but there is carryover money, and that is typically, you know, as we're looking at things, going to be payroll, making sure that we can have payroll covered and whatnot. So I appreciate the question. I would like to add to this conversation, are you, Councilmember Swank, are you referring to the monies that are in the Treasury, that the Treasurer, Thomas is the one who's managing in terms of there being money that the city has?
I'm just asking, what is the pot of available funds? Yeah, that wherever that is.
Sure.
Yeah, that's. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just asking what's, because you know that $4 million house I bought. I didn't mention that I also had another $3 million that I'm not touching.
Sure.
And we talk about the time and value of money too.
Sure.
And we know that we're going to get money in over the next 19 years to replace that. We don't know how much. High university enrollment goes through the roof. We could be sitting on, you know, a golden egg. Kids quit going to college, and right, we could park on Court Street any time of the day, night you want to. We can't predict that. I understand that. And I also understand that money doesn't come in all at one time. Just reading articles today about school districts. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their budgets going forward when they get paid twice a year from some sources, twice a month from others. No, I fully understand it. I just would like to know what's available out there. And I have in my mind a figure, I think that if we pass that point, we've depleted too far. And therefore, I would be very much in favor of the bond issue. But without knowing what that number is, it's tough to make a decision.
Well, the upside of having the citizens pass the safety levy is that we know for the next 19 years plus, that there's going to be dedicated revenue coming in that can only be used for safety services of any type, and we know what that's going to be coming in, give and take, but small. I mean, given that we are a college town, when you look at our past financial trajectory, it's been pretty flat. I hate the word recession-proof because I don't believe in that, quite honestly. However, the beauty of a college town is that you do, it irons those peaks and troughs out, given that we are a college town. And so therefore, to go the bond route and know over the next 18 years, we have a dedicated revenue stream that we can be using to pay back that bond, as opposed to what, council passed, where we are taking away from money that's not going to regenerate itself. ARPA is a great example. That's a one-time thing that we received from the federal government, and to pretty much eat that revenue, gone. To eat it up, it's gone. It's not going to come back again. We've been very diligent with our general fund and being smart, I think. We'd recognize that there was money there that could be used. But to go the bond route, it frees that up to be used for things that are equally important to make sure that we're investing in, whether it's infrastructure or facilities, whatever it is.
It's an important conversation. Thank you, Member Smike, for your questions. Anything to add on it?
Just basically what the mayor said, that CARES Act fund's not coming back to the general fund. Yeah, we're gonna get revenue, but we've never had an unappropriated balance this high, and there's a reason. We are not getting that $2.4+ million again, ever. So, we just spend that, then we're back down to where we're still having to, pick and choose what we can do. As far as the capital money, we did $600,000 out of that. That fund has $1 million unappropriated. So we're, using more than half of that, and I can't tell you how many years it took to get up to $1 million. Because we just don't put that much of a percentage of our tax money in there. There's no revenue besides a small percentage of tax money going into that capital fund. And we haven't, it's just because we've been careful and let it go, now we have that money. But there are things that we could use those capital funds for. But, we're talking years to get that back in there. So it's not as easy as just saying we get revenue every year and that money will come back.
No, but
We'll probably have this paid off before we build those back up.
yeah, that would be great. Well, you did make an interesting point there, though. The tighter the budget, the more it makes us rank order our priorities.
I
think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I believe we do that.
But the tighter it is, the more we have to do that, and I think that's a good thing.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions from other members of council? Members of the public, would you like to chime in on this? Please.
Sorry.
Yes, please. Your name and your address and whether you're representing a group, please.
My name is Lucille Popa. Live on the west side of Athens. I'm representing myself. As just a citizen who's a little unaware, but I just don't know if this has been configured or shared with citizens. But the fire station location, the new one, doesn't it flood right there? I'm sure that's been looked at, but how are they gonna not make it flood there if it floods?
Service Safety Director Stone?
Thank you for that question. When you develop in the floodplain, and that location is in the floodplain, not in the floodway, and there's a distinction between the floodplain and the floodway. This is in the floodplain. Whenever you develop anything in the floodplain, our flood damage prevention laws, both locally as well as at the state and federal level, say that you have to elevate the lowest finished floor to 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain, or what we call the 1% chance of any given year that it's going to flood to that level. For an emergency service facility, you have to elevate 2 feet above it. So it actually takes it above the 500-year, or the 0.2% chance flood. And so we did a significant amount of fill. That's work that's been taking place over there here in the recent months to get it up to that level. And so the base flood elevation, or the lowest level of the finished floor, will be 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain in order to avoid that particular problem.
Good question, thank you. Other comments on this issue? Okay, thank you. The next item on finance and personnel is the telemetry project. This is a project that looks to be in the cost of about $260,000 from the sewer fund. And this is for both software and repairs, I believe. Director Stone, would you like to add to this?
Sure. Thank you, Member Brown. And, one thing that we know about sewage is nothing is cheap when it comes to dealing with sewage. So what this particular request is for modifications to the SCADA system at the wastewater treatment plant. So as some of you may recall, in Project 339, it's an ongoing project we have to upgrade the telemetry system that serves the wastewater side of our utilities. So the various, both the controls at the plant, as well as the various lift stations all around the city. What we call our remote sites on the wastewater side are those lift stations. And that telemetry is the way that we control that system. And to be clear, it's not connected to the internet. That's very, very important from a cybersecurity perspective. And so it's our own network, and it's a radio network that goes and speaks to the various controls at each one of those facilities and internal to the plant. At the plant itself, probably 20 years ago or so, we established a controls mechanism of hardware and software with a thing called DeviceNet. And basically this is in the age prior to when Ethernet cabling was capable of actually running controls instead of just pulling data. We subsequently expanded that device set backbone basically at the plant when we did the plant rehab project back in 2015 or so. Well, we've gotten to the point now that DeviceNet is antiquated, and it is no longer being supported as both the hardware and software that runs all those controls. And so because we were already in a project with telemetry all around the city, we went ahead and got a price from the contractor, IPS, that had won that bid to replace the DeviceNet structure, both hardware and software, all around the plant onto a more modern Ethernet system. And that's the majority of this appropriations request. Additionally, and I think I'd like to modify that number from 260 to 300,000. And the reason I say that is another change order that we've requested from IPS is to look at adding telemetry to the 3 locations that we're going to receive county sewage from, so that we can actually monitor remotely the flows at those particular locations. Right now, the plan is basically to not monitor it remotely, to do regular checks and kind of rely on what the county tells us. And we're thinking it probably is a good good business practice to have the ability to actually see those stations, so that we're seeing flows real time remotely from our own telemetry system. And so I think I can get pretty close by increasing the appropriation and authorizations on Project 339 by $300,000 for both the DeviceNet replacement as well as the telemetry for these 3 sites. It could be that as we get close to the end of that project that it'll cost a little bit more, but I think this is probably in the ballpark.
Thank you, Director Stone. Questions?
I'm sorry, one more comment. I have
Please.
a hard number on the DeviceNet thing. I don't have a hard number on the telemetry, and that's why I'm waffling a little bit about the telemetry for those 3 sites. But I'd like to go ahead and make the request now.
So that bid, or the IPS estimate, was for the not the telemetry, but the
Correct, the DeviceNet
the
replacement.
device, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Members of the committee, any questions? Other members of council? Public? Okay, thank you. That ends finance and personnel.
Thank you, Member Crowell. Our next committee is City and Safety Services Committee, and members Crowell, Grace, and Swank. Member McCary is absent tonight. who's ever vice chair can take over.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Reisner. In Member McCary's absence, I will kick off discussion this evening of the one topic on our committee agenda, and that is a review/update from the administration on the current standing of our city refuse garbage hauling contract. There is a document on our drive with Director Stone's letters, and I will just hand it over to Director Stone, or if that is the desire, I can talk through the document, but I think it might be clearer if you go through from the administration's perspective of where we are at this point.
Sure. Thank you, Member Grace. So there is a document that I shared with the clerk here at close of business today. Apologize for just coming to you today, but it honestly took us up to this point to get it in a format that I believe to be accurate and ready for review. When I got notice about this topic being on the agenda for this week, last week we didn't have enough information to be able to speak intelligently about where things are. Since then, we have gotten a cost estimate from our existing solid waste hauler on what it would cost to do an emergency contract, basically to go in another 6 months. So what you have in this memo is you have basically a synopsis on their additional costs in order to let an emergency contract. And kind of the background with that, as well as what we believe to be the rate increases necessary to pay for that emergency contract. Right now, the garbage fund is razor thin. The garbage fund is set to only take in enough money to spend on the costs associated with it. It doesn't necessarily carry a balance, or not like some of these other funds that we've discussed that have a significant amount of unappropriated balance. It's really set just to have just enough money to be able to pay for that particular service. And so any increase in the contract cost is going to require a subsequent increase in the rates that utility customers pay. So bottom line is that I believe the way ahead, since we rejected the bids, to go ahead and issue an emergency contract where we obviate bidding, because we are too close to the time that the existing contract is going to expire to be able to adequately rebid and be ready to go and get either the current or another hauler established and ready to go on July 1st when that contract is expires, or June 30th and the contract expires. And so AHRC has given us a price for 6 months. They tied it to the consumer price index, basically specifically on solid waste hauling, and they've got a bunch of data to back that up as to why they're charging more that I can certainly share. And our thought, my request, if you read down through the memo, is three things. Number one, to pass an ordinance that declares a real and present emergency to obviate the bidding process and allow the service safety director to enter into a 6-month contract for solid waste collection. We do have the option of extending the current contract, but that has to be with a mutual agreement that the current contract would be extended at the current price. And AHRC has indicated they can't afford to do that. So that's why it has to be a new contract. The reason I say 6 months is twofold. Number one, that will give us enough time to pull together revised specifications and get a new bid out on the street. Number two, that lines up the new contract term with our fiscal year. I think the reason right now that and I'm not entirely sure, but I believe the reason why our current contract term lines up with the state fiscal year is because several contracts ago, when we initially bid this, we tried to line it up with Ohio University's solid waste bid, and they're on the state fiscal year of July 30th through June 30th, and I think we've just kept it that way ever since. And so my thought with requesting the 6-month emergency contract is that basically will place us in line with our fiscal year, which is the calendar year, as well as give us enough time to prepare bids and get those reissued so that we hopefully get good bids that don't have to be rejected. And then the last thing, or the second thing that I'm requesting is that you raise rates accordingly to pay for it, and the proposed rate increases are shown in the memo. And then the last thing is that you pass legislation, and this doesn't necessarily have to go concurrent with these other two pieces of legislation that could happen in fall if you wanted to, or you could do it now, it's fine, to authorize Service Safety Director to advertise, accept bids, and enter into a contract for the lowest and best bidder for the solid waste collection services to begin on January 1st, 2023. So that's my recommendation on solid waste. These are the numbers that I have from them, and this is what I think we need to do in order to keep solid waste collection on track for the city of Athens.
Hey, thank you. And I have a couple of questions, and I imagine other members of the committee might also. So I went back and looked at the information from when we were considering the two bids that ended up, council rejected both of those bids. And at that time, the estimates, had we gone with AHRC for all services, but not new cans, it was a 25% increase across all the rate categories. And this is a 37% increase. So I'm wondering, why does it need to be so much more? Is that because of AHRC's price difference? Like their estimate for their cost and what they need for a 6-month contract is higher than what they provided previously? Or is it where our budget stands? Because I think, doing a little bit of math, the increased cost is 33.6%, but the rate increase was a 37%. So looking at just our year-to-date numbers, the one I happened to pull was just the end of February, so it doesn't tell us too much about this year. But in just January and February, the garbage fund brought in $55,000 less than went out. So I'm just, are the rates too low even for what our current fees are, or our current costs? And so is that why we need as much of an increase to cover the 6-month increase, or the 6 month?
Well, I think I'm following your question, Member Grace. It was kind of long, but I'll do my best to answer it. The numbers are the numbers that we have. We've got a fairly significant spreadsheet that we use to project rates based on the number of accounts we have. Now, understanding that there's some fluctuation in the number of accounts that you have, and as well as what the base cost is for solid waste just to have a service. We feel fairly confident that we'll bring in with this changes $171,000 per month, which will cover the increase in costs, which we anticipate to be in that neighborhood. I do think we were getting close to zero, basically, in the fund. And that's just kind of the nature of running that slim as far as revenue and what the rates are versus what the costs are. Why it's 37% versus 25%? I will hazard to guess that it may have to do with a 6-month term versus a 4-year term, and the ability to number one, if you commit to a longer period of time, sometimes you get some savings associated with a longer period of time. Secondly, I think you may recall that Athens Hockey and Recycling requested more money on the existing contract, and this body only granted a portion of that request. So it's possible that 37% versus the 25% that you saw in their bids for a 4-year term has to do with trying to make up some of the losses that they incurred over the time where they requested more revenue for the recent contract. But again, that would be a guess on my part. So I would encourage you, if you wanted to ask them directly, certainly I think they would answer your questions.
Are there questions or comments from other members of the committee?
You asked my question, Member Grace. Thank you. I guess
Yeah, yes, Member Crowell. You could probably ask it clearer than I did.
Well, I just have a I want to make sure that I understand what Director Stone is asking, and that we're all clear on what he is asking in the letter. The last, second to last sentence of your letter, finally, I am requesting legislation to advertise, accept bids, and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for solid waste collection. What you're suggesting there is to change the way we've been doing this, that it has been a council decision about the contract, and you would like to take that on the way that you've done other contracts in the city of Athens. And so that would be taking this process out of council's hands and into your office. Is that correct?
I would, and I think that, that's the way the law reads, according to the law director's feedback after we, went through the machinations related to this last bid, and I also thought that's what I heard from this body over the last several weeks of discussion on the matter. Certainly, obviously the body has the authority to withhold certain authorities, but I think it would be in everyone's interest to proceed in this manner. And with that, I'll pick an authorization not to exceed in a given year. That could be a way that you could kind of put a cap on that, and that would be stuck in the request for advertising, accepting bids, and entering a contract with the lowest and best bidder for an authorization not to exceed in a given year, which would be similar to, say, our IPS contract for different IPS than the last discussion point, but the IPS that we talk about with our parking meter collection, and that we say it doesn't exceed a certain amount in a given year.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Member Swank.
I really don't know where to begin with this, so indulge me. I don't know how any business in their right mind could ask for this crap. 37%. When the inflation rate right now is at 4.98% and going down on a monthly basis. We should have never thrown out those two bids. But we folded. We folded because of community peer pressure. Everyone in this room knows that one bid was better than the other. $171,000 a year cheaper, which is interesting because there's a real irony here. Total new average cost for the emergency extension contract will be $171,000. And we were talking about a $1.7 million difference, 10 times that. If I recall, in the law director's letter to us, she suggested that one of the options was an extension. We can all go back and watch the video, but I remember very distinctly it was a month or two, not 6. Now, I fully understand and agree with aligning this with the calendar year, January 1st through December 31st. It makes it much easier. We're dealing with one council and not two every other year because of that. That makes a tremendous amount of sense, as does your request, which you and I have talked about for a long time, of putting this bid where it belongs, and that's in the hands of the administration. I'm afraid when the vote comes around, we're going to hear we can't have trash out on the road. And while I agree with that, we backed ourselves into this position by throwing out those bids because of a simple couple of left open boxes. There was plenty of information in those bids to make a decision. But we failed to do it. And that troubles me. This also fails to address the idea of reducing waste by having a standard can. The vast majority of people in Athens will see a $360 a year increase. Excuse me, did the math wrong. We'll spend $360 a year for trash instead of the $250 they're paying now. That's $100. That's a lot of money. Or we could do 12 times 8.23, and that's right at $100. Maybe 24 cents short. But the point is, how can we go out and talk to our constituents, the people in our neighborhoods, and say, you know what, July 1, your trash rate's going up 37%. Even though we tried for 8 months, because we started this in November. For 8 months to get a good trash system. Folks, we're talking about picking up garbage and compost. It's not rocket science. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not criticizing anybody. Maybe criticize myself for going along and voting to throw these out. Today, I see this as a mistake after looking at this document. So what do? If we were to go with an emergency authorization, suspend the rules, and say on May 1, next Monday, go get us a trash hauler. Use your expertise, your experience, and all of that. I honestly think you could do it in 2 or 3 months. I have that much faith in the value you bring to this community. But to borrow the terms from fellow council members, all this does is kick the inevitable down the road where someone is going to have to make a hard decision on what color trucks drive up and down the city streets of Athens picking up our trash. I don't care if we vote today, next week, or in 3 weeks, but there is no way that I could look a citizen in the eye and vote yes to say this is a good thing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Crow.
Thank you. I just wanted to correct factual error in Member Swank's comments, and that every single person in this room did not agree with you on what the best bid that we received was. And I sat next to you for 25 minutes expressing why I felt one of the bids was better than the other bids. You are talking about money. I understand how important that is, and I understand why for you, the lowest bid, that's all it needs to say for you, is the lowest bid. But the language in the Ohio Revised Code says the lowest and best bid. So we need to figure out what that means. When it's not just the lowest bid, it is also the lowest and best bid. And I tried to make an argument, I don't know if you heard me, about why I felt one of those bids was the better bid. And I will continue to stand by that argument. So I'd just like to say that not everybody in this room agrees which of those two bids was the best bid.
If I may. I apologize for losing out a word. Everybody in this room who objectively reviewed the bids and did not have a vested interest in the outcome would logically come to that conclusion. And no, it does not have to do solely with money. You and I and the other 3 people up here could start a trash company tomorrow. It's not difficult. You go out and get yourself some trucks. You drive up and down the road. You throw the stuff in the back of the truck. When the truck's full, you take it to the dumping place. You rinse and repeat. In terms of recycling, you find yourself a MRF who will take as much recyclable material as possible. As much recyclable material as possible, which a couple of us learned about a couple of weeks ago. There are places that take more than what we are currently able to recycle.
Excuse me, Member Swank, I think we're kind of getting off point.
I
Yes.
would like to use my 10 minutes by our rules if I could.
I would like to just stay focused. And also, I do take issue with you degrading the work of the members of our community who provide the garbage recycling. I would not say that it is easy to do well. And we could discuss the previous actions and the previous bids and the pros and cons of what has already happened, but we cannot go back and change the previous actions. However, we can look at our options moving forward, and I would appreciate if our conversations could focus on that at this time.
Because I'll bring it back to that focus. There's nothing wrong with admitting a mistake or changing your mind. And that's basically what I'm saying. I acknowledge that I made a mistake. And I think to present a 37% increase in trash rates on July the 1st, when the inflation rate in this country is a mere 5%, is a slap in the face to the citizens of Athens.
I am absolutely concerned about this new proposed rate, which is why I had the questions that I did, because had we gone with Athens Hawking Recycling, but based on the data that we had available, the proposed increased rate to cover the expenses for that contract would have been 25%, which is high. But now to cover a 6-month contract, we're looking at a 37% increase. I do know, we understand that an extension of the current contract is not an option, as based on administration's communications with AHRC. And our current contract states that it has to be agreed upon by both parties. So the only option, unless the administration feels that they could do something different, is as far as to bid this project again, would be to negotiate a contract of some length of time. And that is the data that was provided to us by the administration. Yes, go ahead, Member Swank.
To that end, the ultimate question is who controls the contract or will control the contract? Will council decide to keep it, or will we transfer that responsibility to the administration? Seems to me that might be the first thing we want to decide. Because if we're going to be forced to extend the contract for whatever period of time, it would be nice to know who's responsible for granting subsequent contracts. And to me, that's, ultimately who's going to be the decision maker. Mr. Stone has on more than one occasion indicated his preference, which I agree with, and perhaps we should decide that first. They are two separate issues.
Yes, just for clarity, and it is not extending a contract with AHRC. It would be a new 6-month contract. There is not an option to extend the current. And so, but at this point, I feel that they are two separate issues, and I don't see that there's a key importance in which is decided first. Are there questions from other members of council or comments, thoughts? Yes, Member Spielness.
Thank you. Yeah, I was rather surprised to see this, actually, and I agree with some of the comments regarding the increase, 37% increase. That seems pretty high without an extensive explanation. So, but more importantly to me is, I am puzzled by why it needs to take so long to make a decision and to rebid. I mean, it's been some weeks now since the other bids were, as was stated, canceled, basically. And so it seemed as though the bidding process, since it already was in place, and I don't believe that there are that many changes that need to be made to it, so I feel as though this may be purposefully, as was mentioned before, kicking the can down the road, perhaps to avoid making a decision. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it does bring that thought to mind. So I'm puzzled by why we can't why the administration can't come up with a new bidding process and then do an emergency decision about accepting a bid so we can move forward with this rather than waiting so long. So this all seems rather puzzling to me, really, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
Director Stone, Mr. Mayor, would you like to respond to that?
I can begin, and then I'm going to let Director Stone take that on. I think Councilmember Swank kind of hit the nail on the head. You mentioned 8 months ago working on this, and that was 8 months of you and Councilmember Crowell and the city's team figuring out how to put this together. So this isn't something that happens overnight, to sit and figure out the metric. Now the language is changing to where it's the lowest and best. I can't recall what the former language was, but it was different. The metrics can change based upon how we're framing this and as we move forward. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I would like to continue to have input coming from Councilmember Swank and Councilmember Crowell, because they were involved in it from the very beginning, to where we're getting this right. So, you know, it's going to take us, it took 8 months to get to this point. It's going to take some time to sit there and reevaluate, re-review the current bid package as we put this back out on the street.
Thank you, Mayor. However, because it took 8 months and I didn't hear anybody say that there was something wrong with the bidding process, I think there was language in there that was not just the lowest. So in my mind, it was a pretty good request and didn't need much change at all. So unless, and I didn't hear anybody else saying that it needed a lot of change either. Maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't hear that. So to me, it's really just maybe a few tweaks and sending it out again. Again, maybe I'm mishearing that, but for the most part, I thought it was a pretty good package to begin with. It's just that the bidders did not follow and address every point that was requested. So in my mind, that's all that really needed to be done, with maybe a few minor tweaks.
So I guess to make the question very pointed, could essentially the same bid request go out if the metrics, the terms, what we are seeking as the city is essentially the same as what was worked on by the group, but with very clear, bold, highlighted instructions. Be sure to complete every section in your bid application. Would that work? Would that be feasible?
You know, my recommendation is what you have in front of you, and it's to pass 3 pieces of legislation, and that's what I'm recommending. And you can choose to do something differently as a group. You can choose to speed up when that new bid would take effect. You know, right now I'm asking you to make it take effect on January 1st, because I think that's the best alignment with the amount of time that will take to pull this together, and also to align with the city's fiscal year. That said, if you want to direct me to do something faster than that, I'll do my best to do something faster than that. But I mean, that's a decision that this body has to make collectively and pass legislation that has a majority number of the people vote to tell me what to do on this, and I'll do it. In the terms of the changes to the existing bid documents, there were a number of exceptions that one of the bidders submitted that made it difficult to evaluate, and those exceptions, and those were things that you know, we had a problem with, particularly, so we would have to modify those documents to say, you know, whether or not we would accept such exceptions. So, you know, do I think we could do it a little faster? Probably. We could do it a little faster than that time frame, but I think it makes sense to have it line up with the calendar year. So, but I'll wait to see what you pass. Meanwhile, people are going to quit picking up trash on July 1st unless we pass something.
Thank you. And I guess since I'm chairing, I'll throw out one other complicating factor, and that is that, to my understanding, and we may need input from the auditor, we can subsidize the garbage fund from the general fund. if we think that come January, we're going to have better rates, do a short-term, perhaps not increase or as big of an increase all at once on the residents. So maybe it's not an immediate 37% increase in rates on January 1, but stagger that increase. The garbage fund would continue operating at more and more of a deficit as long as the outgoing amount is so high. But if we think that there's a possibility that come January, we would have a 4-year contract that would not require as big of an increase, that's something that council could also consider. And I hate to bring that up, suggesting that we enter into a contract with rates higher than what our income in that fund would be, but a 37% immediate price rate and garbage rates, I think, is pretty staggering. And so and this is pretty new information for all of us. As you said, we only got this evening. So I'm trying to think of ways that we could perhaps soften the blow on the residents and work through this temporarily. Member Reisner, you've been quiet thus far.
Yeah, because I really didn't have anything intelligent to say. Is there any, let's see how to phrase this. We're looking at a 37% increase for 6 months. Okay, is there any indication or sign or something that would tell us ahead of time that once we enter into a 4-year contract, the rate will not stay at 37%? Would they, out of the goodness of their heart, say, okay, we got a 4-year contract, we're going to knock it back down to 25%? I don't see anything here that's going to tell me that.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, address that. Honestly, the competitive bidding process is really the only thing that could drive that below.
But if they chose not to, once you taste the money coming in at 37%.
True. Although we could look at, ways to get more bidders. That would be a way we could do it. That's something that there's a little bit of risk with that, because honestly, the more bidders in this arena means smaller haulers that aren't necessarily set up to handle a city of our size. But more bidders would be a way perhaps to achieve a more competitive edge on bidding.
Well, that's just assuming that the Athens Hawking Recycling is aware that there's more bidders out there, that they might potentially lose the contract. What I hear is this statement from them that we cannot afford to continue at our present rate. We need more money. On the other hand, can they afford not to have our business? To me, it looks like if for whatever reason, I'm not suggesting what it is, but if on July the 1st, there's no contract and they decide not to pick up, how are they going to make their payroll? How are they going to pay the gas? How are they even going to stay open? Unless they have our income coming in, they don't really have much of a business. Am I wrong on that?
I think those were great questions for the director of AHRC when he was here a few weeks ago, to have asked him and just say, hey, look, we're just going to pay you what we want to pay you, and good luck. That's the option. Ultimately.
Well, yeah, hindsight is 20/20, and so, all right.
And other questions or comments? Yes, Member Crowell.
Thank you, Member Grace. Just to address Member Spianis's comments and Director Stone's comments, one of the two bids said that there were parts of the contract that they did not agree to. So we can't just take the same set of materials and we can put them back out there, but this is what we're going to get. I don't know why they said that as a matter of their business policy, they don't agree to those terms. So that, we've just heard some testimony up here that we shouldn't have thrown out contracts, right? And I'm wondering about going forward, if we do decide, okay, well, let's now adjust the bidding process and change the part that they didn't want to agree to, Is that what we're going to do with all our city contracts? We're going to just, go and say, oh, okay, no, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to ask you something that you don't want to do. Let's change it so it fits for you. So there were reasons why the bidding process did not work. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. But that is, I think, a real hurdle. The exceptions to the contract that the city of Athens put out. Are we going to just kowtow to that and say, okay, let's change what we've asked for? Thank you.
Member Swank.
Two short things. One, contract negotiation 101. It's a conversation. There were some things in that contract that needed to be negotiated. Give you a quick example. There was a stipulation in there if trash wasn't picked up, that there were fines or penalties or sanctions or whatever. It's wintertime. It's a Thursday, and a storm gets here earlier than it should. And before you know it, the sheriff has taken us from nothing to a level 2 to a level 3. For the safety of those contractors, and this actually happened in a municipality not far from here, they pulled the trash people off the street. And there were people whose trash did not get picked up. By the letter of the law of that contract, that trash hauler was in violation of the contract and could be held in contempt. That may not be the right word, but it's what came to mind. All the one bidder was asking for is to be able to sit down and negotiate the terms of 3 items in there. I don't know if any of you have ever written a contract. I used to write 100 a year, and a quarter of them involved negotiations, simply because some of the things in the bid just didn't make sense. We had people asking for PageMaker 4.1 to submit pages for their yearbooks 7 years after InDesign came out. Where are you going to find PageMaker 4.1? But it was in the bid. Negotiation, it's part of the process. But I have this question for Mr. Stone. Mr. Stone, is it really about when this thing starts, the contract, or when it ends? We could start it in August. We could start it in October, as long as the ending date is December 31st of some year. That would then get us on that calendar year. In other words, the contract wouldn't run from August 1st to July 31st. It would run from August 1st to December 31st of that year, January 1 to 31st, so on and so forth. So after one contract cycle, we're back on that calendar year. So we wouldn't have to wait till January 1st to start this thing. Instead of having a 36-month contract, it might be a 39-month contract or a 41-month contract. Does that?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be, you'd have to explain that in the terms. You
Yes,
could
sir.
Say, hey, the first term is, for 15 months, and the second term is for 12 months, and the third term is, for along those lines. But it would just have to be spelled out.
Yeah, because if I'm bidding on this contract, if I'm one of the 2 that bid, or if we drop, full disclosure, if we drop the population requirement from who can bid from what we had this year, we might very well get a very wide range of bids. And somebody can come in here and blow the socks off everybody. Do we automatically take that? So I guess what I'm getting at, you asked us before, and do we need to do this before we move forward? In our mind, what does the 4-letter word best mean? Because I don't think we ever answered your question.
Are there other comments or questions? Member Spielness.
Well, again, there's 2 points here, and one of them is who makes the decision, and we didn't officially vote on that. I think it's certainly worthwhile to put that decision to bed and vote on it next Monday when we can, if that can work out for everybody. Or put it on the table to vote, whatever we need to do, an emergency clause. And then again, I agree with Member Swank's idea. It seems like that's pretty simple. Just make the first year 15 months or whatever it is to address that issue. But tweaking what we already put out there and insisting that every point be discussed, and if there is anything that they need to negotiate, it's before they come back with full numbers and say this is it. So yes, you need to negotiate. I don't have a problem with that. That makes a lot of sense. There can be things that seem a little funny, but it seems as though it makes no sense to submit your bid and saying, well, we're not going to talk about this. Talk about it before you submit it, and get those things on the table and resolved, and then say, okay, we've made a decision here. This is what you're going to bid. That to me makes sense. So that's my pitch.
Are there any other questions? Yes, please come forward.
Hello again. I'm really glad to be here for this conversation. In relation to what Alan Swank said a while back, I don't think we failed, or anyone here failed this topic by throwing out those bids. I think that was just what happened, based on all the comments from the public and other city workers, like their opinions on it. I think it'd be, and I think that's like a good thing. Like, I think it'd be interesting to look back at the recorded live sessions of these city council meetings to hear why everyone was really passionate about their feelings on trash, which I would totally agree. It is, there's no, how do they say it? There's no unskilled labor, and picking up trash is not an unskilled job. And I started thinking about like, what was going on in like the 1400s. I don't know, maybe there was a trash buggy, but I think back in the day, people dealt with their shit on their own, and now it's literally the world's problem, like climate change, plastic in the ocean. Like, are we gonna have people who don't give a shit about this
Excuse
stuff?
me, could you
Sorry.
watch your language? You're on television.
Oh gosh, yeah, live TV.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I hate that these things are recorded. It kind of makes me uncomfortable. I also wanted to share on April 5th at 10:25 a.m. A Rumpke dumpster fire happened in their truck. Some sort of mechanical malfunction. I don't know. Yeah, I just think it matters who's doing these things, and I'm sure everyone will vote on what is important, but yeah, like, this stuff matters, and yeah, excuse my language, it's easy to call it that, but I mean, it's our waste. Like, it matters where it goes, and it's so difficult for me to grapple with the fact that my future looks different because of what's going on with the oceans and things dying, because it just sucks to have to deal with that, like, grieving process that some of these things aren't going to be around because humans have made them extinct. And obviously this might not relate to this very specific, I think it relates, but I just think it matters, like, who is picking up your trash, and people who are doing it with love and care, it matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That was the only item on
Well,
The
point
agenda.
of order, question, I guess. We have two more items on the agenda.
One more item.
One more item on the agenda. We're going to discuss it. We're going to adjourn, and we're going to all go to our homes. What happens between now and next Monday? We've heard that we are under a time crunch of some sort. What's going to be on next Monday's agenda? And who's going to be responsible for making sure that that happens?
I don't know. I certainly don't feel that there was a clear consensus in terms of what is the correct next step. I think we have a lot of different ideas, and I I'm filling in on a substitute basis as chair today. So I certainly don't want to say that, oh, Member McCary as chair of this committee is going to bring forward legislation. That's obviously not fair. Any member of the committee or of council can bring forward legislation related to this topic. I believe that is correct. Oh, Madam Clerk. Yeah, so
Or administration.
we have a lot of different ideas have been discussed. I don't know what the right next step is. This,
Because
personally, I would have voted to keep AHRC previously had we not voted to get rid of both the contracts. I felt that the missing information in their bid was less significant than the missing information in the other bid, but that our legal guidance didn't recommend that that we move forward in that manner. And so we did know when we made that decision that it would likely result in a time crunch issue because of an expiring contract. So I don't know what the next step is.
So-
Let me speak as President Pro Tem. We already have a request from the administration to bring ordinances forward next Monday. And in our procedures, that's usually been the way that things get on the agenda, is the administration comes to the clerk and they put an agenda together and it's sent out by, Thursday? Okay, usually. So it would seem to me that the way to go forward is to honor the request. The administration submits their versions of the ordinances, of the ideas that they want to put forward. And then being a first reading, if anyone wants to make amendments or changes, they're certainly welcome to do that, or table it, or anything else. Yes, Member Solvay.
Okay. Yes, I hear you, President Pro Tem Reisner. That being said, I'm hoping that the administration will listen to what the council members have been saying and hopefully will not present exactly what we see in this letter as the route going forward. And I think, as has been noted by our Clerk Walker, that we do have an opportunity for other members of council to come forward with their own proposal for an ordinance that may be different from what the administration is seemingly wanting to propose, which, if I'm understanding correctly, is perfectly acceptable. So that's something to consider.
So in that case, let's say, for sake of example, that Mr. Stone and the mayor look at this. They've listened closely tonight and come back and draft a couple pieces of legislation to address these two topics. Get it to the clerk by close of business on Wednesday. Or is it Thursday? Wednesday, that's what I thought. And at the same time, a council member or two drafts a piece of legislation or two addressing these same two things and submits them by Wednesday. Do we really want to get into competing ordinances?
We would go with whatever the council suggests.
Okay.
Yeah, just for clarity on branches of government, we are the legislative branch, the branch that drafts legislation. That is certainly sometimes done at the request or suggestion of administration. And I would say that this is actually three issues. One is the contract. We have a proposal for a 6-month contract that has an average cost of $171,000 per month for the 6-month contract through AHRC. And that contract would cover solid waste hauling for the city July through December. And so there was the request for legislation to authorize declare a real and present emergency to obviate the bidding process and allow the service safety director to enter into that 6-month contract. Then there is a separate bit of legislation needed to address the funding shortfall that would happen in the garbage fund due to the cost of the new contract. And so that would have to be handled through a rate increase. And then the third issue is a permanent or a possible permanent change to the contract process for the garbage hauling. So I see it as 3 issues, 3 separate ordinances. Like the rate increase and the contract would be separate ordinances, correct? Yes. So that, and I think that just it's important to be clear that we have 3 separate ordinances proposed in this memo from Director Stone.
Is there anything that precludes a council member or members working with the administration between now and close of business on Wednesday of drafting such legislation?
Absolutely not. The only thing would be is if there are multiple members of council that necessitate the public
Sunshine.
Yeah, you could have 2.
announcement. Yes. So if it was going to be more members of council than that present, then of course there would have to be, the meeting would have to be announced in advance.
Okay, thank
But
you.
no, I think that would likely be a wise course of action if there are members of council who are available to do so. And members of administration available and interested in doing so. Are there other comments or questions on this issue?
Mayor, do you have one?
Member or President Pro Tem Reisner, I was just thinking about if we're available. This is our jobs. We're here all the time, unless I'm at a conference or something like that.
Yeah, there are occasional out-of-town conferences and other required travel.
We're here all week.
Okay. Then I would like to say that as an end to this committee meeting for this evening.
Thank you, Member Grace. Thank everyone for their input. It's been very spirited. And no, I won't say that. Anyway, one last committee, Transportation Committee, and that's chaired by, me. So will members Grace, Swank, stay, and Ziff come up? And we have a very serious topic here to bring up. It's
We're talking about
It's-
cars. Should be
a dirty thing, but it has to be done. Someone has to do it. A dual axle dump truck for sludge removal. Authorization to purchase. Take it away.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Reisner and Committee Chair Reisner. While this is sitting in the Transportation Committee, really this is another services issue. It's related to sewage again. And what this is the authorization to purchase a dual axle dump truck. This will be larger than any dump truck that we currently have in the city fleet, and it'll be dedicated to the wastewater treatment plant for the collection of sludge. This is kind of the last step in our process of moving from liquid land applied sludge to dewatered sludge that we truck either to a landfill or to other applications that we can find as a way to dispose of the sludge. We placed $150,000 in the operating budget to purchase said truck this year, but obviously we have to have an authorization. We have a price quote right now on state bid for approximately $160,000. What I'd like to request is an authorization of $170,000 and then an additional appropriation of $20,000 to cover the gap basically between what we put in the operating budget and this the $170,000 amount. And the reason that I'm asking for a slight difference between the 170 and the 160 and some change is for any additional features that we intend to put on this truck. For instance, warning lights and perhaps any shipping costs associated with getting it delivered and that sort of thing. So, but by and large, this is pretty straightforward. Our goal when we put in the dewatering equipment or started that project several years ago was to be able to kind of take control and not be beholden to a contractor every time we had to dispose of sludge, and this will be kind of the last part of that.
How big is this thing? How many tons?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dual axle truck, probably in the 10-ton range. I think I don't have the exact number. It's not quite a 20-ton truck like with the multiple axles like you would see, hauling gravel and everything else. But it's bigger than the single axles we have to move salt.
Any questions from committee? Member Swank?
A couple of questions. Excuse me. How often do we have to haul the sludge away? I'll use the correct word there.
If I were to, what we're doing right now is positioning the dumpster, and then we call it to have the dumpster pulled by trash hauler, which relates to our previous conversation. We're not permitted to take more than one load per day to the recycling, to the former Kilbarger, currently Rumpke landfill in Athens and Hocking County at the county line up there. So if we had a situation where we needed to be able to move more than one truck per day, we're gonna have to find another landfill farther away until I can find another location for the sludge to go to, which is very, very challenging at the moment.
So we're doing about one time a day?
Yeah, and some days it's less, some days it's more. I'm sorry, not more. Some it's not for several days, and really it's a function of flow. When I look out into the future, it could end up getting to be a situation where we're having to, go and run a load and then come back and keep dewatering and filling, and then keep guys over and send them to another location with another load. But that would be in a real high production period of time, like where we're really full on sludge. Sometimes it may be 3, 4, or 5 days in between times that we would run a load.
Second question is very much related to the first and kind of ties into a comment you made there. Would this be something, in addition to trash, recycling, composting, that we might want to add to the trash contract?
No, and the reason that I say that is biosolids are a extremely regulated activity, and we have a cradle to grave responsibility for those. And if you are hiring a contractor to take that responsibility, you are paying a significant premium for that cradle to grave activity where they're basically owning those biosolids, and it's because it's a highly regulated activity by the EPA. And what we were stuck in before, if we go in the Wayback Machine to when we lost our sludge hauling contractor and our fields became too rich that we couldn't land apply there any longer, was we were paying a sludge hauler a very significant premium to bring in equipment, dewater sludge, and then truck it away for us and own that cradle to grave process. And Lisa, our plant manager, still had to do a tremendous amount of additional paperwork plus pay a significant amount. So I really think this is something that we really want to keep internal to the city.
And then the last question, are there other uses or additional uses for which we can use this truck?
There are. That's a good question, Member Swank. While it will be primarily devoted to moving sludge, there will be opportunities if we say have a significant earth moving operation somewhere that we want to do internal to the city. We could go, okay, Lisa, stick the cork in it at the plant for a little while. We're going to take this for several days and we're going to run earth, and then we'll get it back to you, and then you'll then produce and dewater sludge, more rapidly. I mean, and that's honestly what it's a turn of phrase, but it's honestly what we would be doing. So we could, absolutely.
Other questions? Committee? Audience? Okay, well, that concludes Transportation Committee, and we're adjourned.
Boom.